So just to kind of go over the agenda real quick, we'll start off as usual with a community sample showcase. We have our colleagues Sathya and Arun, who will go over the virtual event manager. We'll then shift to Ojasvi, who will be going over best practices and updates for bot lifecycle events in Microsoft Teams. And he'll also cover the latest with adaptive cards and Teams as well. And if time remains, we'll have a short session for Q&A. But before we jump into the content, I did want to give a quick shout out that we do have Spring Ignite coming up on the 2nd through the 4th. So if you weren't aware of that, please do come and register aka.ms/ignite. We're going to have some great content there for you all. So please join us on the 2nd through the 4th. Come check it out. With that said, we'll let Sathya and Arun go ahead and take it away.
Thanks everyone for joining. I'm a product manager with Teams Ensuring. I have with me my colleague Arun Kumar as well. We are excited to take you through the features and capabilities of the latest app sample that we had published under the PNP Teams Dev Samples. This sample app, Virtual Event Manager as we call it, is extremely powerful in the sense that it bundles a variety of marquee Teams platform capabilities in one single app. Specifically, this sample app will help you as a developer to get to play with following key aspects. The first one, of course, is the calling and meeting bots. We have bots that can be registered and set up such that it can initiate peer-to-peer calls, invite more people into an existing or ongoing call by using Graph APIs for calls and online meetings. We call them as communication APIs. This app sample that we have over here utilizes such a bot to initiate a call and pull participants into the call. The next one, or the key capability that we are highlighting in this sample code, is apps and Teams meetings. I'm sure most of you would know about this. Not so recently, I think it would be some 4 or 5 months back, we had announced about the availability of Teams apps in a meeting surface. You all know and are familiar with apps that are in the personal scope, that are in a team or channel scope. Now you can have the goodness of Teams apps on the meeting surface as well. If you don't know about this, I strongly recommend that you check out the developer documentation around this. We have a good amount of information and a sample code app as well that talks about how you can build apps specifically for Teams meetings and how that experience would look and feel like for the end users. This is a really interesting capability, and this unlocks a huge number of scenarios. So apps and Teams meeting is definitely something that you should check out if you haven't heard about this so far. But this is old news, right? What this sample does in addition to apps and Teams meeting is it uses a Graph API to programmatically add an app that we want into a meeting with no manual intervention at all. Third capability, this app will also showcase a use of OneNote Graph APIs that we use to save notes that you take during a meeting into a OneNote section and a page of your choice. Finally, I think this is also very important, especially when you're developing apps in education sector scenarios, right? The app provides a way for you to programmatically capture attendance of people who actually join the calls. Not all the attendees, but people who actually join the calls. So be on the lookout for these 4 points, these 4 capabilities in our demo now. What you see over here is basically a demo of the app in action. We open the app, and this is primarily designed from as a personal scope app. We have a tab SSO that we are using for signing in. And once we sign in, we use the personal scope tab interface that you see over here to create a Teams meeting. This step uses a Graph API called Create Event Graph API that uses input parameters such as the subject, the participant information that we enter, which is, by the way, uses a people picker. And we use the input parameters, also the start date and time, end date and time of a meeting, to call the API and schedule a meeting according to those parameters. Now, this gets added to all the attendees' calendar on its own and creates a Teams meeting join URL as well, as you're familiar. Once this event is created, this is a crucial step. If you see over here, at the time of meeting, the bot actually calls you. There is an actual call that gets placed to the user. This is a meeting join notification that typically appears for any team meeting. But in this case, there's a bot calling all the attendees. And when you click on answer, you get pulled into a meeting. That's the way a calling and meeting bot works. And once inside a meeting, you can have a business logic such that you can have an IVR on entering a certain sequence, the person is pulled into a meeting. That's up to your business logic. As you can see over here, the bot also is a participant. This is the other person also getting pulled into a meeting. If you see over here, the bot is also added as a participant in the meeting. What this means is, whatever we have in terms of audio or video discussions as part of the meeting is something that a bot gets access to as well. While this is not something that we use as part of the sample app, this is potentially something that you can extend, you can take up and do some audio or video processing of the content that is presented in the meeting or discussions that happen in the meeting. A possible idea that I'm just throwing out there is, since the bot gets access to the audio stream as well, you can potentially use some kind of audio processing to do live translations as well. Now, the third capability that we talked about is adding an app as part of the meeting, right? That's what you see over here. Now, in this case, we didn't add an app to the meetings manually. This has been programmatically added by the app, by the business logic itself, using a graph API, which we will cover in much more detail in a bit. What you see over here is, using this app surface on the side panel, we are able to, the users, the attendees in this particular meeting are able to capture notes that are happening during the meeting. Any team discussions, anything that you want to be added as notes can be captured on the side panel. And when saved or shared, this is calling the OneNote Graph APIs in the backend and storing it in the OneNote section and page that we create programmatically as well. This is a beautiful integration across a meeting surface, an app on Teams platform, and OneNote, all different platforms within ecosystem coming together in one go. In the same way, you can also use not just OneNote Graph APIs, think about using tasks and other APIs as well, and integrate taking notes and action items as part of a meeting right in one place. The last part that I mentioned regarding capturing the attendee details who joined the meeting, right? This is also equally important when you think about education scenarios. In a lot of education sector, one of the frequent asks that we hear from customers is the ability to programmatically capture who joined the meeting and when, and then report it in some form of a dashboard. Now, this sample app provides you a means to do that. What it does is, it periodically captures the snapshot of attendee information every 3 minutes. When I say periodically, it captures every 3 minutes and logs it in Azure Cosmos DB. So you have all the list of attendees at 3-minute interval, which you can potentially merge all these snapshots and then do your own processing and analysis on top of it to come up with a meeting capture attendance. With that, I would want to hand over to my colleague Arun to walk you through rest of the capabilities in much more detail in the technical layer.
Thanks, Sathya. And myself, Arun. So I am working in Teams partner ecosystem as a full stack developer and supporting partners as well as developing these sample codes. So whatever Sathya showed, it is already available in the PNP samples and in the GitHub. As Sathya said, there are the 4 different sections on this. The first section is creating online event. So for that, we used this Graph API. For all my samples, we used delegated permissions, but this is the Graph API we used for creating an event. So whenever you will create an event with the parameters like users and the subject and the participants, it will take that input and it will create a online event in your calendar so that participants also can see that meeting in their calendars. That is the first Graph API which we used. And the second one is, once we created an online event, based on the time or based on that scheduled time, by calling an online meeting bot. In this case, I used audio call, and my calling an online meeting bot will initiate the call to rest of all the folks, and they can join the call. Once they can join the call, we also used a Graph API called list of participants. That means whoever joining the meeting, I want to capture all those people and store it into one storage. Either in my case, I stored in the Cosmos DB, but we can also store it in the SQL, also wherever you require. But we used a Graph API to capture all the list of participants. This is a communication API in that you need to pass the caller ID. Call ID. That means our meeting ID. Then you can able to get all the participants information from that call. So these are the three different sections. One is online creating an event using this Graph API. Once we created an event, then used a calling an online meeting bot. After that, we used a list of participants. Now, coming to that app in a team, or how we developed an app in a team. So this is the documentation which Sathya shared. So in our case, we used side panel experience. So there are the four different experiences if you want to develop any app for a meetings. One is like a pre-meeting app experience. Another one is a pre-meeting tab, and another one is a post-meeting. The other one is in-meeting dialogue. So in-meeting dialogue means it will use a notification API, and also it will pop up like a task model in a meeting. The last one is the side panel one, which we used it. This one is a side panel. So if once you installed your app, so that the app icon you can able to see here, and you can able to see all your window here. This is called a side panel. So in our sample, we used a side panel app so that you can capture your all notes information. You can capture OneNote updates in the meeting as a owner or as a member. I can update my notes also. So we took that concept and we added side panel app in our sample. And how we can, earlier we don't have a Graph API to add any app into meeting, but recently there is a new Graph API is introduced, and this is the Graph API for that. So if you want to add any app into meeting, you can use add a app to chart. That means you can able to add a chart using a chart ID, using a in-person chart ID, or using a group chart ID, or using a meeting chart ID. You can able to add your app into particular meetings. So in that case, in our case, we use this Graph API, and we used a delegated permission for this, but this is also will support for application permissions as well. Once so using that, we are able to add our app into that particular meeting, whatever we created using online meeting. So it is like a sequence. Once we created an online event based on that meeting ID, I can able to add an app which is already installed in my tenant. So there's a sequence like we followed. It's like once we created online event meeting, or after we created online event meeting based on that meeting ID, based on the chart ID, which I already installed my OneNote app into my tenant. That app I installed into every meeting. So imagine that if you have a doctor and patient condition, if you want to, as a admin, if you want to schedule a calls, so that you can schedule a call, so that in every meeting, if you want to add a meeting, so that you can use this automation, or you can use this Graph APIs to do all those things. And finally, for our sample, we used a notebook Graph APIs to create a notebook on fly. So in my case, I used a notebook called group/ID because I binded for one particular group ID. That's why we created a OneNote Graph APIs. And once we created a OneNote page as a owner, as a meeting owner, I'll create a first OneNote page. Once it is created as a member, I can update that particular page and I can update my notes. So these are the different Graph APIs we used as part of this sample.
Thanks for walking through that, Arun. In terms of what you saw over here is just a framework, right? A sample app, right? As we rightly call it, it's a sample app. It's a base framework that has been given to you, which you can extend into multiple use case scenarios that you can build as a full-fledged app, and you can take it to other customers or build for your own requirements. Now, in terms of what scenarios can potentially be lighted up using the sample app is what you see over here. This is not a complete list. This is just a starting point. I'm just giving you some ideas to think along these lines. Definitely, like Arun mentioned right now, there is even a doctor-patient scenario that can be lighted up now. What you see over here is in an education sector, using the sample app, you can extend some parts of it to build a solution, to build an app that allows professors or teachers to create Teams meeting for classes and have a bot listen in and transcribe that meeting into a language of choice for students. It can even listen for keywords that need to be marked or tagged, and you can do further analysis based on that. Students part of the same class who want to take notes together can use the side panel, and all notes that can be taken can also be grouped together in a particular location within Teams. And of course, the attendance report feature is something that we saw already. In an enterprise scenario, take any enterprise, there is always manager team meetings that happen. Definitely, this could be used as a collaboration mechanism for teams to come together, keep track of notes across different meeting instances and action items. And you can, like I mentioned earlier, even integrate tasks and planner into this. Collaborating on learning and development would also be made easier by this, by way of having questions posed during training session and gathering participant answers. The side panel, as you saw in the documentation, the opportunities are limitless. In terms of help desk contact center, this is another area that calling and meeting bot would be vital. Imagine any contact center scenario, right? When someone raises a support request, it gets assigned to an available agent. The app that we currently have calls the attendees that are explicitly mentioned. You can customize it such that when a support request comes through, the bot looks up a set of agents in a database, identify who's available based on their presence or shift timings or calendar availability, and then call an agent who is currently available who can answer that particular request. So in this way, you can use this sample app as a base and can actually build a contact center solution as well. These are some of the ideas that I want to put in front of you. Of course, there are multiple other scenarios that you can imagine and build on top of this. And I'm happy to hear if you have any questions, anything around this, and we can take the questions in the Q&A section. Over to you, Jun.
Awesome. No, this was super interesting and really great. Thank you, Sathya and Arun. Really appreciate it. Okay, moving on. Ojasvi, I see you online. Do you mind presenting your screen and kind of walking us through, best practices and updates for the lifecycle events in Teams, as well as the updates to the adaptive cards?
Yeah, sure. Hey, morning, June. Thanks, Sathya and Arun, for the presentation. Hey folks, a week or two ago, we released a new bot with some new updates to the bot conversational lifecycle events. And I'm just going to walk you through what those are, how you should think of using them, and what are some best practices that you can put in place for your apps. And then I'll quickly go over some new features that we're releasing with adaptive cards. I'll only cover the features that are in dev preview or generally available. Since the last time I spoke, I'll be back with more features as they're generally available. So what are conversation update events? So many times inside your applications, you might want to know that when to trigger a welcome message, for example, when a bot has been added to a team, or when do you send a welcome message to a user when they've been added or removed to a team. So on the right, you can see the Icebreaker app. So the Icebreaker bot app. The Icebreaker app is one of those sample templates that are available as part of the Teams platform. So Sathya and Arun just showcased one of the Teams templates. Icebreaker is another one that is effectively used as a team building or as a team building app. What happens is you've got a bunch of members in a team, and every week the bot matches up two people so they can have a one-on-one conversation or go for a coffee or something along those lines. It effectively helps with team bonding, and especially with everyone online, it's a great tool to increase workplace collaboration. Now, what you would want to do as an application developer in this scenario is, let's say someone new, one of us joined the team, you would want to send them a proactive message in a one-on-one chat, letting them know that what this bot is, what team has it been added to, who added it, and what's the context around all of this, and why are you sending it a notification, how the users can expect the bot to behave over the coming period of time. And that is actually fundamentally possible by the conversation update event, because every time a new user will join the team, you will get this event, and based on that, you can like initiate this workflow inside your bot. You can also trigger notifications when a channel is created, renamed, or deleted by the user if you are tracking those types of interactions. And another example would be when a bot message is liked by a user. This is an interesting one. So teams, we have certain types of reactions. For example, people can like your message, they can heart it, they can give it an angry reaction to it, and you can potentially make use of it on your side. One interesting use case that we've seen is, for example, an acknowledgement. Let's say that your bot sends a message to users, and somewhere over there it says, hey, if you've read this message, please acknowledge the message by liking it. And that's one of the ways that we've seen certain people accomplish workflows. So it's some sort of a feedback loop on behalf of like users, and that is also a conversation update event. So that just sets a little bit of an example of like what these things are and how you can use that in teams. Now, here are some new conversation update events that we have added over the past few months. Team deleted, team restored, team archived, unarchived, and channel restored. Effectively, what you can see with all of these, what we're trying to do is give you the access to the entire end-to-end team and bot lifecycle, like from when a bot has been added to a team to when users are being added to a team, users have been removed to a team. That was all previously available. You can go and we'll link to the blog post, which has a lot more details about all of this, as well as the documentation with the blog that goes out. I've also got into the slide, but all of those events were previously available. Now these events are filling in the little gaps that were there. Like a user could have gone and potentially deleted a team. After the team was deleted, in certain cases, the IT admin could have restored it. Now, what would have happened is that, if the team got deleted and you weren't aware, your bot would just be sending messages to this particular conversation, and you would just not get any reasonable response. So now you can make use of this particular event and make some sense as to what is happening with the team and like where we are in the conversation lifecycle. And fundamentally, right, like the key ways I will see you using it is one, to clean up team and channel data. If there is anything that you are storing it, if you'd like to like clean that up for data retention purposes. And secondly, to like pause notifications and messages to that team, because no one really is over there. Okay, moving forward, installation update events. So we've got a new type of event that we're calling the installation update event, which effectively tells you when a bot has either been installed or uninstalled from a thread. Previously, some of this was available in the conversation update event. When a bot would be added to a team or let's say a group chat, you would get a conversation update event, but it wasn't holistic. There are other cases where a bot might be installed. The bot might be installed in the personal scope. The bot might be installed by the graph. So moving forward, or you might add a bot as part of an app upgrade, where initially you ship a tab, but then you decide you want to add a bot to that tab, and then you're pushing an upgrade. So there are all of these niche scenarios, and we decided that to make some cohesive sense out of all of this, we need like another event update category type, and we're going to call these installation update events. These are currently in developer preview. They haven't GA'd yet, and they will GA next month. And the intended use would be to, one, send an introductory message from your bot on installation. So over here, I've got the Poly app, and you can see that I'm in store. And I'll say open add to a team. And once I've added to a team, this particular bot sends a welcome message to everyone in the team, letting them know that one of the teammates added it, what are some attributes of this bot, what it can do, and so on. Generally good practice. So we recommend that moving forward, these type of introductory messages that introduce the app in the group scope, whether it be a team or a group chat, come from the installation update events. Secondly, another very important use case of this will be to clean up and delete user and thread data when uninstalled. So some of you might have like privacy, GDPR compliance requirements. You might have data retention requirements on your side. The installation update event is going to be the right way to use this. And this was also one of our primary motives to create like a separate event just for this use case, because we wanted to make sure that we were covering all the edge cases. So if you're looking for that sort of a scenario, which I'm assuming many of you would be, I would highly recommend you check out the installation update events. Another change. So changes to the post-install behavior for bots in personal scope. So, since we added an installation event, we're also making a few changes to how bots will behave when uninstalled. And essentially what we've done is we've aligned the behavior to that with bots inside Teams and personal group chat scopes. So on the right, I have the App Studio bot, and I have uninstalled the bot. And upon uninstallation, you see this little message over the compose box. You cannot send messages to this bot. So we effectively block conversation to and fro from the bot upon uninstallation. Previously, we would not do this. Like, you could theoretically still uninstall a bot, and for reasons you could still send messages to it and the bot could still chat with you. So we decided to withdraw from that behavior and align it across the board between personal scope and group scope, because you cannot do this inside a team or a group chat. Once a bot has been removed from that conversation, it's been removed. So if you do send messages in this case, you will see a 403 response code. Over here, this is the blog that we released. I have basically in this thread gone ahead and shared in a concise manner what we've expanded over in a lot more detail over there. Let me quickly show you the blog post. So here is the blog post. Just walking you through what we covered. You can find a summary about what conversation update events are. These have already been documented on the Teams developer website. Then we've got the new types of events, the installation update events. We've got an entire schema of the installation event, which you might want to take a look at. The key field to look over here would be the action field, which describes to you whether the event is pointing to a bot being added or the bot being removed from a particular conversation. And then we've got a little more details about the post-install behavior. And lastly, I'm going to mention something about navigating some common exceptions and tips on error handling. So sometimes in the past, we've seen that when we add new events, the installation update event, for example, is a new one. Bots don't necessarily know how to handle these events on their side. And there are mainly two reasons as to why this would happen. The first one is that you built your bot without the bot framework SDK. And as such, your bot is throwing an exception every time you're seeing an unexpected event. So you need to handle that in your code, because we can add events anytime in the future. And you must design for the possibility of receiving unexpected events. The second one is if you have built a bot with the Microsoft bot framework, but you chose to alter the default behavior by overriding the base event handler. So even in this case as well, you would need to handle this properly. If you are using the bot framework SDK, we'll handle this for you moving forward, no issues at all. But otherwise, please take a look at it, because we are really working towards providing a richer and richer data set in terms of what happens within an application within Teams. So we do expect to keep on adding more events in the future. And lastly, if you got issues or just general feedback for us, please reach out via the feedback page over in our developer documentation over here. Or you can also reach out to me on Twitter and ask for help. So that covers the bot's lifecycle portion of the chat, and I can take questions towards the end. Let me quickly share some latest features that we've now released with adaptive cards and Teams. The first one is full width adaptive cards. For those of you who've been following along for the last few calls, you've probably seen these slides before. I'd mentioned full width adaptive cards around Ignite last year. And the good news is now they are in dev preview. I expect them to be in generally available sometime this week. And as soon as they are, we'll release the documentation on the Microsoft Teams developer docs page. All you have to do is how do you use these guys within the Microsoft Teams schema element? You subscribe with equal to full, and that's it. That's all you have to do, and you get a full width adaptive card. I personally like this feature a lot. This is probably one of my favorite features because there is so much free space out here to like create more elegant and full width cards. You should probably use this one. I can see a lot of developers using it. In fact, to show you how this is going to look, let me quickly go over and give a real quick demo. So now we're back in Teams. This is the same App Studio bot that I had blocked earlier. It's my favorite bot to play around with. And this is the difference. I have the same card over here with normal width and the same card with full width. And it's functional right now within dev preview. You can go ahead and check it out yourself. This width over here is the maximum allowable width inside a message bubble. So we've given you all the space we can. The other good thing about this feature is, there is a feature for pop-out chats, and the width of the card will dynamically scale with the window as to how large it gets, and then you can further squeeze it short. So it's gonna react to that at certain positions in length. Overall, it sounds like a pretty fundamental feature, but there was a lot of engineering work on our side to make sure we got the dimensions and the width right and all of the breakpoints like resize and rescale the cards. Let's look at the second feature that we have for type ahead search. So basically, form input is one of the key features that you would associate with adaptive cards across the board. You have some sort of like information that you would want to grab from the user and send it back to your bot. More often than not, that information ends up being in the form of an adaptive card. So over here, we've got an adaptive card for a stay-at-home sales conference in 2020. And we want to essentially add a category towards this expense. Now, what static type ahead does is you can place the input on a choice set, and as the user is typing it, it narrows down the list of available options, and then the user can just go ahead and select the right one. Previously, we've seen cases where people had up to 70, 80, 100 options, and you would have to just constantly scroll to find the right one. And now with this one, it's more intuitive, it's a lot simpler. So we're definitely very excited about releasing this one and see how you'll leverage it, especially for the form validation scenarios if you're using the input choice set already. In terms of how to use it, very simple again. You can just go into input.choiceset today and change the style equal to filtered. That's all you would have to do. Earlier, the style would have been compact for a scroll down menu, and changing from compact to filtered essentially gives you the autocomplete type ahead functionality, because everything else is fundamentally the same and it's all over there and it's just handled by the Teams client. This is another thing that I really like about adaptive cards, that we've got an entire full-fledged feature in terms of static autocomplete, and the entirety of the code change that it would take for you to enable this is just one line of code, and that's about it. So there we have static autocomplete. Let me give you a quick demo of this one too. So let me switch into my client. So here we are with an adaptive card. This particular adaptive card has it's a choice set over here, and it's asking where do you want to eat for lunch, and we got a lot of options in terms of where we could go, and we can say we can choose the cafe where we want to go, and it just works from there. So that's it. That's static type ahead for you. Let me head back to the presentation. So that both of these features are available in dev preview right now, and the instructions are over here, and you can try it out right now. With the blog post, we can also share some instructions on how to switch your client over to dev preview, but I'm assuming if you guys are all pros with Microsoft Teams development, and you know how to do that already, because this is the Teams community call. So you can switch over to dev preview and try both of these features out. They will be GA within the week because we are in the final stages of development, and at that point the documentation will be out as well. If you within the next month or within the lead up to build, I think in addition to what I have right now, we've got about 7 or 8 more features. So little about anywhere from 8 to 10 features that will GA for adaptive cards over the next 2-3 months. Essentially, we're really committed to getting adaptive cards in the Teams platform right, and we'll keep on investing heavily over here because we see these as fundamental atomic elements that can really make apps shine and contribute to a significant portion of the user experience. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you. Jun, do you want to take over?
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you, Ojasvi. Really appreciate that. No, these were some awesome updates. So now we got about 18 minutes left. So I'll open it up to Q&A. So you can either ask questions in the chat bar if you have access to that, or raise your hand. Before we kind of get started, I know there are a couple questions that were already asked and answered in the chat bar, so I'll go ahead and just repeat those. So for those that don't have access to the chat bar, that what was asked and what the answer was. So the first question was from Matt, and he asked, does virtual meeting bot need a Teams license, and what are the API permissions needed for that app? And Sathya was able to answer that and mention that, yes, a Teams license is required since we're authenticating the user to create meetings, and the bot also needs to recognize the user to invite into a meeting as well. And so each Graph API needs different permissions. A second question from Akshay was, can we hide the bot from the participants' pane in the Teams meeting? And the answer was, we don't believe that this is possible as of today, but we'll look into that kind of going forward. And then there was another question in the chat, which wasn't answered just yet. So, Ojasvi, this one might be for you. So Lou had asked, is there a way to subscribe to events without building a bot for that purpose? Meaning have events hit a different endpoint of our choosing?
So Lou, unfortunately, there is not. These events are specifically for the bot as it gets added or removed to a particular team or a channel. What scenario did you have in mind though? Or if you'd like to follow up offline, feel free to reach out. But no, they're primarily for the bot.
All right, so it looks like we've got a number of questions that have just come through. Ugo has asked, voting, stars, control. Ugo, can you provide a little more context on that?
Yeah, just using form cards, so forms, where I can use voting, so stars inside the card to press preference or stuff like that.
Right, for example, in certain applications where you can rate a particular delivery experience or stuff like that.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah. Nothing on the roadmap for stars. Are you aware of the adaptivecards.io backlog page? So you can go over there and express your intent that this is a feature that you would like, and if it gets enough traction and upvotes from the community, then we'll consider it. But right now, there is no intent for that.
Yep.
Okay. And then Matt asked, any plans for translation of adaptive cards, sort of like messages?
So basically, you mean localization, right, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, a single click in Teams, I can translate a message, but the card, obviously, I can't because it's a bunch of JSON. So I'd love to be able to an easier way to translate cards versus sending the text to the translator API or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we have many times tried to figure out the localization problem for cards and see how we can solve them. The challenge that we run into is that localization is largely a function of the locale of the client, and intent would typically be sent by, it's owned by the bot or the card author. So we run into some technical issues over there, and there wasn't a straightforward way to solve it. We are looking into it, but there is nothing immediate on the roadmap, Matt, that would address it.
Thank you. I know it's not easy. Thanks.
Yeah.
And then, Ojasvi, another question from Lee. Do we have a timeline on when input validation will be present in adaptive cards and teams?
Yes, we have a timeline for March 2021 for when that will be present in teams. And that is one of the features that we're looking to GA before bird.
Got it. And then it looks like James had a question. When will custom packaged policies going to be GA? So for these policies questions, James, I'll follow up to see if we can find the right SME or if anyone on the call knows, or anyone to call on Microsoft knows. But I'll go ahead and put this in our parking lot of questions to follow up on afterwards. And then Lee asked again, Ojasvi, is there any plan to improve accessibility with adaptive cards and teams? Currently, Immersive Reader ignores the content of adaptive cards.
Yes, absolutely. There is a significant effort in this semester to improve adaptive cards accessibility in teams. Matt Heidinger over in the adaptive cards community call might be the right person to provide you more details. But there was an accessibility pass done just last month where people went in and identified problems and some core set of features and scenarios were identified. So people will start working on it, and over time you'll see many targeted fixes towards addressing accessibility within adaptive cards and teams. So yeah, definitely there's going to be a decent amount of work in that space.
Got it. And Ojasvi, I'm not sure if this is another question that Matt would be able to answer better, but Net had asked, adaptive cards don't seem to be available for GCC customers. Same with bots. Can you please confirm?
So I believe they are available in GCC low. They might not be available in GCC high, which is correct. So did you mean GCC low or GCC high, Annette? Yeah, because if it's low, then please send us an email. We'll try and figure out what's happening. But if it's GCC high, then yes, they are not supported. Apps are not. Bots and adaptive cards are not supported.
Any other questions from the audience today? We're at the end of the chat list of questions. If anyone has any other questions, please feel free to reach out into this chat and ask those, and we can always follow up afterwards. But thank you everyone for joining the call today. We have a number of different developer community calls for you to join. So please, take a mention of, take a screenshot of this if you don't already have access to this, but here are the AKA links to be able to get those invites. But yeah, after this call concludes, we will recap and post this on our YouTube account, as well as our developer blog. But again, thank you all for joining. Really appreciate it, and have a great rest of the week.